The microphone screeched as the crowd gasped, and my name burned from the projector. Noah said, "Relax, Ava. It's just a reading." Laughter hit like hail. I saw my private texts on the screen, edited to rhyme, stamped with his logo. Liam said, "This isn't right." My chest locked as Noah bowed to applause that used to be ours. He called it fiction, but every line was a scar I hid in late messages and shaky voice notes. Grace covered her mouth and shook her head. Noah said, "You wanted honesty." He smiled at the praise like he earned it from my bruises. My throat asked for air and found cameras instead. I stepped forward and the room tilted. I felt the floor lurch as another verse turned my apology into a punchline. Liam said, "Ava, walk out with me." The stage lights burned like noon. The crowd wanted more. "Noah," said the villain, "always hates the ending." I stared at him, and the friendship we once swore would survive anything snapped like thin glass. The corridor swallowed the applause, and my pulse thudded like a door someone kept knocking. Liam said, "He weaponized your trust." I pressed my forehead to the cool wall and tasted metal in my mouth. Noah's voice bled through the plaster like a radio that forgot how to turn off. "Grace," said Ava, "we need to document this." The posters for the reading curled at the edges, promising catharsis and truth. I remembered writing those late confessions because he said the page was a vault. Liam said, "He will say it is art." I wanted to scream that the poems were stitched from nights I almost broke. Grace said, "We gather proof, then we hit back." I closed my eyes and saw the first promise we ever made at 19. Noah said, "Honesty deserves applause." The hallway lights hummed and flickered, and the floor steadied. I lifted my head and bitterness turned to something cleaner. I said, "He wants my silence to finish his story." The memory hit with a summer breeze and a cheap campus coffee smell. Noah said, "If we ever make it, we bring each other along." We were broke and loud and convinced talent was a raft. I read him a draft and he laughed, the good kind, the kind that lifts. He said, "Your voice is a knife and a lullaby." We shared notebooks, passwords, even the same chipped mug. Liam said, "You two are ridiculous," and took our photo by the library steps. Grace sent us open mics and urged us to care more about truth than claps. We swore we would never sell pain we did not own. We promised to protect each other's soft parts. Noah said, "We are a pact." I said, "We are a promise." The future wore our names like new jackets. We believed every word and stitched them into our sleep. Cracks arrived as silence with manners. Noah skipped calls and answered with polished lines. I found my phrases in his captions without my name. Liam said, "Ask him." I tried, and he dodged with jokes and deadlines. Grace said, "Document patterns." I saved screenshots like a tired detective who loved the suspect. Noah said, "We are a team," but his calendar had rooms I never entered. I told myself success makes people weird. I told myself loyalty is a bridge, not a chain. Then he pitched a show and used my heartbreaks as scaffolding. He said, "It is inspired." The word tasted like rust. Liam said, "He crossed a line." I held the bridge ropes and felt them fray under rain. The decision did not roar. It arrived like a clean breath. I stood straighter and heard my voice return. Liam said, "Name what he did." I said, "He stole the context and called it craft." Grace said, "We draft a statement and secure the evidence." The hall smelled like wet paper and lemon cleaner. I pictured the library steps and our promise under cheap summer stars. Noah said, "It's only a story, but stories shape the room you must live in." I would not live in his. I gathered the text threads, the timestamps, the edits he forwarded by accident. Liam said, "I am with you." Grace said, "Me too." I walked back toward the door, and the light did not burn this time. The applause faded into weather. My hands steadied around the truth. The summer heat stuck to our skin, and the laughter was the kind that forgot itself. Noah said, "When we make it, we split the stage, not the spotlight." We were sitting on cracked steps with plastic cups of soda. I said, "Promise me we never become what we hate." He clinked his cup to mine and grinned. Liam snapped another photo like he was archiving legends in the making. Grace said, "You two sound like a headline already." The grass hummed with cicadas, and the library lights glowed behind us. Noah leaned back and said, "We'll turn the nights we nearly broke into sparks." I believed every syllable, because in those hours trust felt like stone, not paper. I felt stitched to him by something untearable. Grace said, "This is rare, don't waste it." Liam said, "Immortalize it, Ava, put it in a line." So I did, scribbling on the back of a receipt, unaware that someday that very line would be twisted into his showstopper. The night of our first open mic tasted like nerves and neon sugar. Noah said, "If you choke, I'll jump in." I replied, "If I choke, let me drown." The tiny cafe smelled of espresso and dust, and the mic leaned like it had survived wars. Liam clapped the loudest, and Grace passed flyers to strangers like we were worth their time. Noah read a poem about loyalty, his voice low and certain, and I thought no one could fake that sound. When I read mine, his eyes never left me, steady as if he wanted the crowd to feel my words exactly as he did. Grace said, "You two are unshakable." Liam said, "They'll remember this night." I tucked the memory like a locket, believing it would always shine the same. Rain chased us one night into the library basement, notebooks dripping, shoes squeaking. "Noah said, write fast before the storm takes it." I laughed and said, "Ink bleeds better in rain anyway." We sat cross-legged on the carpet with lightning flashing through the high windows. Grace sprawled with her recorder, capturing our nonsense. Liam said, "Someday these tapes will sell for millions." We traded drafts like contraband, each line sharp and alive. Noah said, "This is the kind of night people envy." I nodded because it was true. In the thunder, trust grew like vines. We were reckless and endless, and convinced we were building something eternal. We made oaths in the cheap diner that knew us too well. Grease smell clung to our jackets, and the jukebox hummed with old soul songs. Noah said, "We don't sell each other's stories, ever." He looked at me with that iron promise. I said, "Your words are yours, mine are mine." Liam said, "Put it in ink." Grace slid her pen across and said, "Write it on the napkin." So we did, in jagged ink that bled into paper fibers. Noah kissed the napkin and laughed. Sacred text. I folded it into my wallet where it lived for years. It felt like a shield then. I had no idea someday he would rip his own oath and use my lines as his weapon. On the rooftop, stars half hidden by city haze, we thought forever was ours. Noah said, "If we fall together." He stretched arms wide against the skyline. I whispered, "If one of us rises, we lift the other." Liam said, "This is the movie moment." Grace said, "No, this is better because it's real." The wind carried our voices into night like paper lanterns. We carved initials into the ledge with a pocket knife, swearing the city itself would hold our pact. I thought stone never forgets. I didn't know that stone crumbles under enough weight. Still, that night felt immortal. I never thought the boy who said those words would be the one to push me from the edge years later. The first crack sounded like a missed call that rang inside my ribs. Noah said deadlines ate my week, and the excuse felt pre-chewed. I found my opening line on his feed, polished and nameless. Liam said, "Credit him or confront him." I drafted a calm text and backspaced until it looked like surrender. Grace said, "Track it, patterns matter more than moments." I scrolled until the glow felt like frost on my hands. Noah said, "You're sensitive," as if tenderness were a flaw to sand down. I remembered the napkin oath and felt the ink dry into dust. I told myself loyalty needs room, then watched that room lock me out. A silence moved in and arranged the furniture. The meeting was supposed to be a check-in, but the table felt like a trial. Noah said, "My show needs sharper edges," and his eyes slid past me. The producer praised a scene that wore my voice, like a stolen jacket. I said, "Who wrote that monologue?" And the room tasted like copper. Noah laughed and said, "Collective process." The phrase stacked like sandbags. Liam said, "Say the title of your source." And the producer shifted in her chair. Grace said, "Document the calendar invites and drafts," and I nodded without blinking. The projector hummed while a slide labeled Integrity glowed over us. Noah said, "We all inspire each other," and my fists practiced breathing. I felt the pact loosen like a rope in rain. A headline formed in my skull and refused to leave. The post went viral before I could name the bruise. My metaphor about the lock and the flood stood center stage without me. Liam said, he lifted it whole and sent screenshots with timestamps. Grace said, "Watermark your drafts going forward," and I hated needing armor. Noah said, "Ideas choose their owners," and my stomach lurched. I remembered the basement storm and how we wrote like thieves stealing back our lives. I messaged calmly and attached dates, and the calm tasted like iron. He replied with hearts and a joke about great minds. The comments crowned him brave, and my pulse turned thin. Liam said, "We build a record," and I said yes because truth needed scaffolding. The algorithm loved our collapse more than our beginning. I asked to meet at the diner where we wrote our oath, thinking memory might soften him. Noah said, "You're reading malice into process," and stirred coffee he would not drink. I said, "Name me where you used me," and the chrome reflected a stranger. He smiled like a blade and said, "You're bigger than footnotes." Grace texted, "Record the call if he consents," and I kept the phone face up. Liam sat 2 booths away, pretending to study receipts. "Noah," said Artie's origin, and the sentence scraped bone. I reminded him of the napkin and his knuckles tapped the table twice. He said, "Nostalgia is a bad editor," and slid the check toward me. The neon stuttered and made everything look drowned. I left with a yes to nothing, and a no that finally caught fire. The next morning arrived with a message from someone I did not expect. A former assistant wrote that the drafts were filed under my initials, and then renamed. Grace said, "Ask for the folder tree and access logs," and my breath steadied. Liam said, "We have the timeline now," and the word now felt like a match. Noah sent a group text about Unity, a preemptive hymn. I answered with dates, file names, and the napkin scanned flat as a relic. He said, "You're making this public," and the threat blinked beneath the words. I said, "I am making this true," and the room brightened without sunlight. The quiet between pings felt like the moment before thunder. Every promise we made began to echo, and finally break. The whisper came from a voice I thought was gone. An old friend of Noah's sent me screenshots, lines of mine that were lifted straight with timestamps attached. Liam said, "That's the shadow from before." Grace said, "This makes the betrayal undeniable." My hands shook as I scrolled, the truth layered like sediment I had ignored. Noah once swore he never touched those drafts, yet here they were, with my name erased and his added. I remembered our rooftop oath, and the initials carved into stone now felt like cracks in bone. The past had crept forward, wearing proof like armor. I said, "So he built his empire on my confessions." Liam said, "Now you know what he's capable of." Grace whispered, "The mask is slipping, Ava." The silence afterward roared louder than a crowd. Noah arrived late to the studio, his charm turned up too high. He said, "We're here to celebrate milestones," but his eyes darted when I held his gaze. The producer congratulated him on a monologue I recognized as mine, word for word. I asked, "When did you write it?" And the pause before his laugh was the crack of lightning before rain. Liam said, "That line was Ava's in 2018. Grace texted me, "Document this live." Noah leaned back and said, "Inspiration doesn't come with ownership." His smile looked carved, not alive. The room applauded, but my blood cooled into steel. I thought of the napkin oath, burning now like brittle ash. I told myself, this is not forgetfulness, it is theft dressed in applause. The wedge was not subtle anymore. Grace noticed Noah lingering too long near her, his compliments sticky with ulterior weight. She said, I feel used in this war. I said, you were never meant to be the battlefield. Noah smirked and said, don't make everything about betrayal. Liam clenched his jaw, watching the exchange, and the room tilted with discomfort. Grace looked torn, guilt painted in her eyes, though she had done nothing wrong. Noah leaned in too close, whispering lines I had once given him, twisting them into flirtation. I felt my lungs shrink, not from jealousy, but from the knowledge that even intimacy was another canvas for his theft. Liam said, he's manipulating everyone now, and Grace nodded slowly, torn between friendship and unease. The truth detonated in public. At a live reading, Noah unveiled a piece stitched entirely from my private journal entries. He said, pain belongs to whoever can frame it, and the crowd roared like a storm. I stepped forward, pulse hammering, and said, those words were mine, stolen from nights you promised to God. Liam shouted from the aisle, show the proof. Ava. I raised my phone, displaying timestamps and drafts, each line branded with my name before his edit. The audience gasped, the kind that splits a room in half. Grace said softly, it's over for him. Noah's face froze, mask cracking, as silence cut deeper than applause. The betrayal was naked now, undeniable and irreversible. The betrayal no longer whispered, it screamed in every silence that followed. Noah cornered me backstage, his voice brittle. He said, you ruined me, as if I had stolen from him. I said, you ruined yourself the moment you made my wounds your stage. His hands shook, but his smile returned, desperate and thin. Liam stood at the door, arms folded, guard unbroken. Grace said, don't give him another word, Ava. I felt the weight of years collapsing, promises dissolving like sugar in water. Noah muttered, they'll forget soon, but the truth echoed too loudly to vanish. I turned away, spine straighter than it had ever been. The twist was no longer his secret. It was my truth, carved in stone for all to see. The confrontation began with no stage, no lights, only the raw air between us. Noah said, you made me a villain. I answered, you wrote yourself into one. His hands fluttered like birds desperate to escape a cage, but his eyes were fixed on me like blame could glue me into silence. Liam stepped closer and said, he owes you an answer, not excuses. Grace whispered, this is the breaking point, Ava. My chest burned, not from fear but from years of swallowed words finally clawing free. Noah laughed hollowly and said, the world prefers my version. I leaned forward and said, not anymore. Tonight they heard the truth. The echo of my own voice startled me. It carried thunder I didn't know I owned. The words exploded like shrapnel. Noah shouted, I carried you. You'd be nowhere without me. I said, you carried my wounds into spotlights and claimed them as trophies. His voice cracked, but his anger filled the walls. Liam said, truth doesn't need decoration. It needs acknowledgement. Grace's hand trembled around her phone as she captured everything. Noah's face twisted with rage, then collapsed into mock sorrow. He said, I only wanted us to rise together. I answered, then why did you climb over me? The silence afterward was heavier than the shouting. Old promises resurfaced like ghosts. I said, do you remember the napkin oath? The vow never to sell each other's pain. Noah sneered, oaths are theater, and I'm the actor who turned it into a career. My chest ached as if that napkin burned in my pocket again. Liam said, that wasn't theater, that was trust. Grace added, and trust is what you shredded. Noah laughed, but it was sharp and joyless, the sound of glass breaking in an empty room. I said, you hollowed every moment we built and filled it with applause that doesn't belong to you. His silence was a confession, louder than denial. The silence turned into fire. Noah slammed the table and said, you'll regret crossing me. I met his stare without blinking and said, I already regret trusting you. The air vibrated with unsaid violence. Liam positioned himself between us, his body language a shield. Grace whispered, he's unraveling. Noah's breath came in ragged bursts, his mask shattered completely. He said, you'll fade, Ava, and I'll keep shining. I said, not on my words anymore. The storm in me surged out, lightning with every syllable. For the first time, I saw him falter. The climax broke like thunder. Noah said, you can't erase me, his voice echoing hollow. I said, I don't need to erase you. I only need to stand in my truth. The walls seemed to crack with the weight of it. Liam shouted, this ends tonight, his words cutting final. Grace added, and the world will know who wrote the pain. Noah's face drained of color, his arrogance stripped bare. For the first time, he looked small, almost frightened. I felt rage burn into clarity. The storm that destroyed us also set me free. The friendship died in that instant, its funeral written in the silence that followed. The storm was over, but the silence afterward was heavier than the thunder. I sat at my kitchen table, the documents spread out like wounds turned into proof. Liam said, you've won the truth, but at what cost? I whispered, at the cost of us, at the cost of him, at the cost of the girl who believed. Grace's voice through the phone was steady. Closure doesn't always heal, Ava, but it clears the path. The smell of rain lingered through the window screen, and I remembered nights where trust was air. Now, it felt like smoke. I said, I don't know who I am without that bond. Liam replied, you're the one who survived it. The words sank into me like an anchor, grounding me in a new kind of pain that felt like beginning. I walked the city streets alone, the same streets we once painted with laughter. Noah's voice echoed in graffiti slogans, but they no longer felt like his. I whispered to myself, the city doesn't carry his ghost, it carries mine. Liam's text read, remember who first held the pen. Grace wrote, don't confuse betrayal with definition. I passed the cafe where we first read aloud. The tables rearranged, new faces unaware of the ghosts sitting among them. My chest tightened, but I kept walking. The betrayal had stolen the shape of our bond, but not the truth of who I was before him. I said out loud, I existed without him. I will again. The city lights flickered like applause meant only for me. The decision hovered like a blade, revenge or release. Liam said, expose him fully, ruin what's left. Grace countered, move forward, Ava. Don't let him anchor you forever. I stared at the napkin oath in my hands, ink faded but still visible. My heart wanted justice. My soul wanted peace. Noah's last text still burned in my inbox. They'll forget you. I whispered, I don't need them to remember me. I need to remember myself. Liam sighed. Then make the choice and own it. Grace said gently, choose the version of you that feels free. I folded the napkin and tucked it into a box of memories. It was no longer a shield or weapon. It was simply history. The silent observer finally spoke. Grace said, Ava, betrayal doesn't erase the bond. It only reveals who cherished it and who abused it. Liam nodded and said, you gave years of loyalty. That's not weakness, that's strength. I felt the words sink into me like a balm, not to heal but to remind me I was more than what I lost. Noah's shadow lingered, but shadows fade with light. I whispered, I will not let him be the author of my silence. Grace said, then write louder than his lies. Liam added, and know you're not alone in the noise. For the first time the weight lifted slightly, replaced by something resembling dignity. The wound still bled, but it bled truth. The walk away was not triumphant, but it was final. I left the box of old drafts locked in a drawer, keys heavy in my pocket. Noah's name still echoed in circles around me, but it no longer pierced. Liam said, you've drawn the line. Grace said, and lines become walls when needed. I nodded, breathing slower, the storm behind me still roaring but distant now. My voice said softly, the friendship is dead, but I am not. The night wrapped itself around me as I stepped into the rain-slick streets, no longer running, no longer breaking. The resolution wasn't peace, it was power carved from loss. The bond was gone, but I remained, carrying scars that gleamed under the city lights like new armor. The city felt quieter, though I knew it was not. I walked beneath street lamps that buzzed like tired guardians. Liam said earlier, "You've carried the weight, now let it go." Grace added, "The scar will remind you, but it won't own you." My chest felt raw but lighter, like something had finally been put down. Noah's name still hung in the air, but it no longer stabbed. It floated like smoke, fading at the edges. I whispered, "He took my mistakes and dressed them as stories, but now I have mine back." The night answered with silence, and silence finally felt like peace. The shadow of Noah still lingered, not in body but in the cracks he left. I saw his face on posters, still smiling for audiences, but the mask no longer fooled me. Liam texted, "Let him live with his version." Grace said, "His applause will sound hollow when truth echoes longer." I passed one of his flyers, torn and damp from rain, and for the first time, I didn't stop to stare. I whispered, "He doesn't haunt me anymore." The words floated out and felt true. The silence of letting go was sharper than any confrontation. My reflection stared back at me in the window of a bookstore, and for once I didn't see the girl betrayed. I saw a writer reclaiming her own story. Liam said, "Your words belong to you again." Grace added, "Write them louder, Ava." I pressed my palm to the glass, feeling the warmth of the shop lights against the cold night. The pain still burned, but it burned like fuel, not like fire consuming me. I said softly, "I will not disappear. I will begin again." My voice cracked, but carried steady enough to echo in me. The friendship was gone, but its ghost would always walk beside me. I no longer wanted to chase it. Liam said, "Some bonds die, but they teach you how to build stronger ones." Grace said, "Don't bury the past, just let it rest." I stood on the rooftop, where we once swore forever, and traced the initials carved there, now weathered, barely visible. I whispered, "We are not forever. We are finished." The wind carried it away, and the city hummed below, uncaring but alive. The weight slid off me like a heavy coat I no longer needed. The final blow was not loud, it was a whisper that cut sharper than any scream. I said he didn't just betray me, he betrayed every version of us we could have been. My breath fogged in the cold night, and I let it vanish into the dark. Liam and Grace's voices echoed in my memory, but I needed no witness for this ending. The story was over, but its scar would live in me like an echo carved permanent. I walked into the night, not healed but unbroken.